The sun had begun to sink behind the red hills of Montana, painting the wild frontier in shades of gold and blood. The prairie wind carried the scent of dust, pine, and something else, something faintly sorrowful like a secret buried too long. Near the edge of the open valley stood a small, lonely ranch house with walls that had known both laughter and loss. A woman sat by the porch, her trembling hands clutching the edge of a worn shawl. Her name was Evelyn Grace, a widow of just 27, though the lines around her eyes told a story older than her years. She had once been the wife of a cattleman who promised her the world, but the frontier had a way of taking more than it ever gave. When her husband, Thomas, rode out one stormy night and never came back, she buried her grief beneath the soil along with his name. Since then, she had lived quietly, tending the ranch, raising a few horses, and avoiding the world that seemed determined to break her. But that evening, as the light faded, a rider appeared on the horizon, tall, dark, and unfamiliar. The sound of hooves against the dry earth broke the silence, echoing through the canyons. Evelyn rose slowly, her eyes narrowing. Few men came this far west without reason. The rider dismounted at the gate, dust swirling around his boots. His coat was torn at the sleeve, and his face, shadowed beneath a weathered hat, bore the marks of long travel and quiet suffering. He didn't speak right away. For a moment they just stood there, two souls carved by hardship, measuring one another through the silence. Then, in a voice that carried the low timbre of exhaustion and purpose, he said, "Ma'am, I ain't here to cause trouble, but I reckon I've got nowhere else to go." Evelyn studied him carefully. He looked dangerous, not the kind of danger that comes with guns, but the kind that carries stories too heavy to tell. "You're trespassing," she said softly, her voice steady though her heart was not. "This land don't welcome strangers." He gave a faint, bitter smile. "I ain't asking for welcome, just a night's rest, and maybe a bit of mercy." Something in those words made her hesitate. Mercy, a word she hadn't heard spoken kindly in years. Against her better judgment, she nodded toward the barn. "There's hay in the loft. Keep to yourself and be gone by sunrise." He tipped his hat. "That's fair enough." As he led his horse to the barn, Evelyn felt an unease she couldn't name. There was something in his gait, something deliberate, like a man walking toward his final confession. The night grew colder, and when the first drops of rain began to fall, she lit the lantern and waited by the window, watching shadows flicker against the barn door. The storm came fast, thunder rolling across the open plains. Then, a cry, not of fear but pain. Evelyn grabbed her shawl and ran outside. Lightning flashed, revealing the stranger collapsed near the corral, blood darkening his shirt. She knelt beside him. "Lord have mercy, you're hurt." He tried to speak, but the words failed him. She dragged him into the barn, her hands trembling as she saw the bullet wound near his ribs, old, festering. Whoever this man was, he'd been running from death itself. As she cleaned the wound with water from the trough, he groaned but did not resist. When his breathing steadied, she whispered, "You'll die if you don't rest. Whoever did this to you might still be out there." He looked at her then, eyes the color of storm clouds. "I ain't afraid of dying, but I can't go yet. Not till I've done what I came for." Evelyn frowned. "And what's that?" He didn't answer. He just looked past her, toward the fading horizon, where lightning split the sky in two. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The stranger was still alive, though pale and weak. Evelyn brewed coffee on the stove and sat beside him. "You never told me your name." He took a slow breath. "Garrett," he said. "Garrett Hale." The name struck a faint memory in her. A whisper from old frontier talk. She had heard that name before, years ago. A rancher from Dakota Territory. Some said he'd killed a man over land rights. Others said he'd saved a woman from raiders. No one ever knew the truth. "What brings you here, Mr. Hale?" she asked. He met her gaze. "A promise," he said simply. Days passed. Garrett's wound began to heal under her care, though the silence between them grew heavier. Evelyn had not spoken so much to anyone in months. Yet something about him stirred long-buried emotions, compassion, curiosity, and fear. One evening, as the sun set over the endless fields, she found him standing outside, staring at the grave near the oak tree. Thomas's grave. He turned when he heard her. "Your husband?" "Yes, I'm sorry." She said nothing. The wind blew through the grass like a whisper from the dead. Garrett's eyes softened. He was a lucky man. Evelyn looked away. "Luck don't last long out here." Later that night, as she sat by the fire, Garrett finally spoke of his past. "I worked the northern ranges once," he began. "Had land, cattle, a wife. Lost it all to a man I trusted. He burned my ranch, killed my brother. I went after him. Didn't mean to, but I killed him first." Evelyn stared at him. "You're a fugitive." "I was," he said quietly. "But I didn't come here to hide. I came because that man left behind a little girl. I swore to find her. She'd be about 5 or 6 by now." Her heart froze. Her hand tightened on the cup. Garrett continued, his voice trembling now. "Her name's Lily. She was taken in by a widow after the shooting, somewhere in Montana territory. Folks said the woman lived alone, raised the child like her own." The room fell silent. Only the fire crackled between them. Evelyn felt her breath falter. I know her," she whispered. "She's asleep in the next room." Garrett's eyes widened, disbelief and hope colliding in his face. He stood slowly, the weight of years lifting and crashing all at once. Evelyn rose, too, her body shaking. "You're saying Lily is your daughter?" He nodded. "Mine and Sarah's. I've crossed 3 states to find her." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. "I found her half dead by the river 3 winters ago. I didn't know where she came from. I just couldn't leave her." For a long moment they stared at each other, 2 souls bound by fate, by grief, by the cruel mercy of the frontier. Garrett took off his hat, his voice breaking. "I owe you more than I can say, but I can't leave her again. She's all I got left." Evelyn's voice trembled. "She's all I have too." The silence that followed was unbearable. 2 parents, one by blood, one by love, standing at the crossroads of destiny. Then Garrett said softly, "Please, just make it quick." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "What?" "If you mean to stop me," he said, "do it now. I won't fight you. I just want to hold my girl once before you send me off." But Evelyn did the unthinkable. She stepped closer, her hand shaking as she reached for his. "No, I won't stop you. She deserves to know her father, and maybe we both deserve a second chance." Outside, the wind carried the scent of dawn. The first light touched the plains, washing the land in gold once more. For the first time in years, Evelyn smiled, fragile, uncertain, but real. Garrett looked toward the door of the small house where his daughter slept, his eyes glistening with a kind of hope only a broken man can feel. The frontier had taken much from them. But that morning, it gave something back, something worth fighting for. The morning came quietly, as if the land itself was afraid to breathe. The storm of the night before had left the fields wet and shining, a thin mist curling above the earth like ghostly smoke. Evelyn stood by the doorway, watching as Garrett knelt beside the corral fence, his head bowed, his hands trembling slightly as he mended a broken rail. The rising sun painted his face in gold and shadow, every line telling a story of pain, penance, and resolve. Inside the house, the soft sound of a little girl's laughter echoed, the voice of Lily, the child who had unknowingly tied 2 broken lives together. Evelyn turned her face toward that laughter, her heart twisting in ways she didn't understand. For 3 years, that sound had been her only reason to live, the only warmth that filled her lonely home. And now, that same laughter belonged to another, to a man who had come out of nowhere with a past soaked in blood and regret. She could feel the weight of that truth pressing down on her chest, heavy and unrelenting. Garrett hadn't asked for forgiveness, nor had he demanded anything. He simply stayed, helping with chores, repairing the fence, feeding the horses, and never once asking for more than a kind word or a quiet place to sleep. Yet every day he was there, Evelyn's heart fought a war between gratitude and fear. She wanted to hate him for coming back, for taking away what little peace she had built. But every time she looked into his eyes, she saw something that silenced her anger, the same pain she had carried since Thomas died. the same emptiness, the same desperate need to belong. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the prairie in hues of fire, Lily ran to Garrett, clutching a wildflower in her small hand. "Pa, look!" she said brightly, her voice full of joy that didn't yet understand loss. Garrett froze at the word. Evelyn, standing by the porch, felt her breath hitch. The word hung in the air, small, innocent, but powerful enough to crack open every buried wound. Garrett crouched down, his eyes wet, and took the flower gently. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice breaking. Evelyn turned away, pressing her palm against her mouth, hiding the tears she could no longer hold. That night, as the house lay quiet and the stars spread across the vast sky like spilled silver, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She walked outside, barefoot, feeling the cool grass beneath her feet. Garrett was sitting by the fire near the barn, his face lit by the flicker of flame. She approached slowly, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. "You should rest," she said softly. He looked up, his eyes heavy with thought. "Rest don't come easy to me," he replied. She sat across from him, their faces glowing in the amber light. For a while neither spoke. The wind rustled through the grass, and somewhere far off a coyote howled. Finally she broke the silence. "What will you do when she knows the truth?" Garrett looked into the fire. "I don't rightly know. Maybe she'll hate me. Maybe she won't even remember her mother's face. But she deserves to know who she is, what's left of her past." Evelyn nodded, her heart tightening. "And me? What do I become once she knows?" His eyes lifted to hers, eyes that held years of loss and unspoken things. "You'll always be the woman who saved her. That don't change. And maybe the one who saved me too." For the first time in years, Evelyn felt her defenses crumble. Her breath trembled, and she whispered, "You don't know what you're saying." Garrett stood, walking closer. The firelight caught the edge of his face, rough and solemn. "I know exactly what I'm saying. You think I came here to take her from you, but the truth is, this place, this home, it's what I was searching for. I ain't had peace in years, Evelyn. Not since the night everything burned." She looked away, blinking back tears. "Peace don't last long out here," she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled sadly. "Then maybe it's worth fighting for this time." The days that followed felt like a fragile dream, quiet, tender, and uncertain. Garrett stayed, working the ranch as if it had always been his home. Lily followed him everywhere, laughing, asking questions, holding his hand like she'd done it all her life. Evelyn watched them from the porch, feeling both joy and grief tangled together like vines. She wanted to keep that peace forever, to freeze the world in that fragile moment. But deep down, she knew the frontier never let anyone rest too long. And sure enough, one morning the past came riding back. It began with the echo of hooves. Evelyn was milking the cow when she heard it, a steady rhythm cutting through the wind. Garrett was already outside, his hand instinctively reaching for the revolver at his belt. Two riders approached from the east, their horses kicking up dust. When they drew closer, Evelyn recognized the look of lawmen, hard faces, clean coats, and eyes that had seen too much. The older one raised his hand. "Garrett Hale," he called out, "by order of the Dakota Territory Marshal, you're under arrest for the murder of Owen Price." Evelyn froze. Garrett's jaw tightened. He didn't move. The younger lawman dismounted and stepped forward, hand resting on his gun. "You can come easy or you can come hard," he said. Lily appeared on the porch, her small voice trembling. "Pa?" Garrett looked at her. Just one look, full of everything he couldn't say, and then slowly raised his hands. "Don't hurt the girl," he murmured. Evelyn ran forward. "Wait! You can't take him. He saved lives out here. The older marshal shook his head. "Ma'am, the law don't care for stories. We care for truth. He's got to answer for what he's done." Garrett's voice was steady. "It's all right, Evelyn. Maybe it's time I stop running." Lily began to cry. "No! Don't take my pa!" The sound tore through Evelyn's soul. She looked at Garrett, her eyes wide with desperation. He gave her a faint smile, the kind of smile a man gives when he knows his fate is sealed. "Thank you," he said softly, "for giving me a reason to live again." They took him away at dusk, his silhouette fading into the horizon. The house felt emptier than ever before. Lily cried herself to sleep that night, and Evelyn sat by the fire, staring into the flames until dawn. The next day she saddled her horse. If the frontier had taught her anything, it was that some things were worth riding into hell for. The journey to the marshal's camp took 2 days. When she arrived, Garrett was locked in a wooden holding cell, guarded by 2 men. His face was bruised, but when he saw her, he smiled faintly. "You shouldn't have come," he said. "I had to," she replied, gripping the bars. "You think I'd let them hang you without saying your piece?" He chuckled weakly. "You're a stubborn woman, Evelyn Grace, and you're a fool if you think I'll let Lily lose another father." That night, under the silver light of the moon, Evelyn stood before the marshal and told the truth, every word of it. She spoke of how Garrett had been hunted, how he'd lost everything, how he had come not to hide but to make peace with his past. Her voice cracked but never broke. The men listened, their faces unreadable. When she was done, there was silence. Finally, the older marshal sighed. "The law's the law," he said quietly. "But sometimes a man's truth weighs heavier than his crime." He looked at Garrett. "You'll ride with us to Dakota. You'll stand before the judge. But I'll tell him what I've heard tonight." As they rode away at dawn, Evelyn followed behind until the horizon swallowed them whole. She watched until Garrett's figure vanished into the golden light, her heart torn but her spirit unbroken. She returned home to Lily, holding the little girl close as the days turned into weeks. Months later, a letter arrived. It was worn, dirty from travel, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Her hands shook as she opened it. "Evelyn, they gave me a chance. Not freedom, but mercy. I'll work the northern ranges under watch, pay my dues with sweat instead of blood. I think that's fair. Tell Lily I love her. Tell her I'll come home when the earth forgives me. And tell yourself, I ain't forgot what you did for me. You saved more than a man. You saved a soul." Garrett tears fell onto the page as she pressed it to her chest. Outside, the wind whispered across the plains, carrying the scent of wild sage and rain. Evelyn looked toward the hills and smiled through her tears. The frontier had taken her husband, her peace, her faith, but it had also given her something rare, the proof that even in a land as unforgiving as the West, love and mercy could still find a way. And as she lifted her eyes to the horizon, she whispered softly into the wind, "Come home soon, cowboy." The sun dipped low again, painting the world in gold and fire. Somewhere far away, a man rode through the plains with hope in his heart, following the same sky, the same wind, the same dream of returning to the only place that had ever felt like home. The end. If you loved this story of love, loss, and redemption on the American frontier, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this. Stories that remind us that even in the wildest places, the human heart always finds its way home.